Welcome to the Doug and Mike Show. I'm Mike.
And I'm Doug, and we have real conversations with real people. Mike, who do we have on today?
Doug, we got a great guest today and an awesome topic. We have Matt Willhite, who is a captain in Palm Beach County Fire Rescue and also a representative in the House of Representatives for the state of Florida, 86th District. Did I get that right, Matt?
That is correct. Yes, thank you.
Awesome. Well, Matt, welcome to the show, bud.
Well, thank you, Doug and Mike. Thanks for inviting me to the show, and always happy to sit down and talk about a serious topic that's affecting our state, but even more affecting our first responders.
Well, we really appreciate all the work that you've done as a representative. We'll find out a little bit more about your role in all of this as we move forward. But why don't you give our listeners a little snapshot of your life, where how you got to where you're at?
Well, I decided to follow in some of the family business and become a firefighter. And so about just over 22 years ago, I joined Palm Beach County Fire Rescue, rose up through the ranks. I serve as a captain now. I also continued on a lot of my family's tradition of being in the military. So I served 8 years as a corpsman with a Marine unit. And so I continue to serve. And then I decided in my local town to run for office and became a local city elected official, a councilman for 8 years. But just a few years ago, I decided to run for another office, and that was the state representative for the 86th District right here where I live, where I currently serve. And it's just an honor to continue to serve my community in as many ways as I can.
Matt, just the challenges. How are you able to, juggle everything as far as just being a firefighter and a state representative?
Well, it's difficult. I would say the most difficult part is that I'm also a father, and I have 2 young children, and I have a wife. Those are the most important things to me. But then I do have a job as a firefighter, and I'm able to have some other employees work for me, and I work for them at different times. And so we take my own vacation time that I've earned, and not just to go on family vacations, but to work and represent the district that I represent. So we do that throughout the year. I'm lucky enough to I'm fortunate enough to have great staff working with me and helping me and do a lot of things on a daily basis for that community outreach. But we make it work. And again, I'm honored to be able to do it. And I'm happy that they continue to allow me to serve them and elect me and put me in these positions to try and hopefully pass good legislation like we're talking about today.
And I also understand that, Matt, you are one of the first firefighters still riding the truck that is in the legislature.
I'm the first active firefighter to be elected to the legislature. There's been some other former legislators that were firefighters, and they were retired, and then they ran for public office and held these honorable positions. But I still ride the truck. I actually got off this morning at 7:30. I worked the previous 24 hours, and then today I'm doing some function as a state representative, and tomorrow, and then I'll be back on work on Saturday. So again, that's that ability that I have in my schedule, and the support of my coworkers that we balance this.
Well, let's jump into the PTSD bill. You definitely know firsthand of everything the first responders and even the military are exposed to. So how did you go about, drafting up the bill and getting involved with it?
Well, speaking of PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, the military has recognized after so many battles and wars that these soldiers that are taught and trained to go out and do the things they do, that when they come back to their families and their everyday life and jobs, they're just not the same. And sometimes it's difficult for them to cope with that transition, and not to mention the things that they've had to see in battle. And so those things don't ever go away, and they see those and they haunt them for many years. And so, with our first responders every day, our police officers, our firefighters, our EMTs, paramedics, they're out there on the streets every day answering 911 calls. And when they do, they see a lot of terrible things that happen that they can't forget about either. And so we've realized that in the first responder community across this country, that firefighters, police officers, unfortunately, the things they're seeing, they can't forget them. And the worst case is that we have them taking their own lives because they're just not able to cope and deal with the things that they see. Not to mention that, the difficulty was that they didn't have 100% support from their employer. And so that's what this bill aims to do, is to try and give them some more support from their employer to allow them to manage and deal with the difficulties that they continue to deal with, those sights and those thoughts and sounds and smells that they run on our streets every day, taking care of our community that, may have been in a terrible car accident, or may have had their house burned down, or maybe someone took, their child died, or those many different things that are so tragic that happen. And these first responders just need some help. They just want to work, but they also want to be able to cope with these things and live an everyday life.
So when you sit down and we start drafting a bill and we start going through that process, do you have, are you having families at this point communicating with you? Are you working with firefighters that are sort of helping you or guiding you or driving you to make this a certain way?
Oh, of course. There's nothing that we do as lawmakers we do on our own. These aren't our own decisions. These aren't the things that we deal with every day. Unfortunately, these things are happening. But, this bill, the intention and the idea of this bill has been thought about for a few years and tried to work with. But we just didn't get there. The state of Florida just didn't get there. And so I did have some families, and especially one from Tampa, a young woman named Megan Villa. Her brother took his life just over a year ago in Tampa. And she just was so troubled by the fact that her employer just didn't offer her brother, Stevie Ledoux, the assistance that he needed. He was put on a workers' comp and then told to come back to work and pay back the department for the time he was out. But the difficulty, the serious difficulty of that is that he was already dealing with a problem, and now he has to pay back, which is another problem. And unfortunately, people just sometimes can't cope with that,
Wow.
and they resort to suicide. And that's not something that should happen. Family members are left behind, kids are left behind, and this was all during the course of their work. And so, we did sit down with a lot of players here, participated in this, came up with some good language and some an idea of what to do. We filed a bill. Obviously, it goes through the committee process. It goes through everything. It gets amended and changed and passed. And hopefully, what we've done is certainly going to be beneficial to our first responders and their families.
Now, something like this, it had hurdles. It had opposition. This wasn't just like everybody was wrapping their arms around this, loving this to death.
Absolutely.
Well, laws and legislation should be difficult to some extent because it shouldn't be an easy thing to change and impact people's lives. And so this bill, as you say, it did have some challenges. First of all, this first stigmatism, is it real? Do people really have problems with post-traumatic stress disorder? Or are they just faking something? So that's the biggest hurdle that had to come over. And that was the worst probably part in the military that they didn't want to accept. You're not tough enough. You should be able to deal with this. And thank goodness that the military recognized it. So we already had a great example to show that people are dealing with things. And this is a real problem. And so that was the first hurdle to overcome. And then, it had 4 committees in the Senate, 3 committees in the House. It has to pass the Senate floor, the House floor, and then the governor has to sign it. So it had to pass 9 times before the governor even got a chance to sign it. And thank goodness he did. When it hit his desk and he committed to signing it, knowing that this was a real issue and it was an issue that needed to be addressed and needed help.
And what would you say to obviously just being, having a real conversation about this, there's been some opposition to it in terms of, is it enough? Does it go far enough? Does it provide enough protections? Obviously, the enemy of good is perfect. But what would you say, we may have, need to improve on, or what is in there that may not be perfect?
Well, again, yes, like you say, we can't always predict every scenario, every case, everything that's going to happen. We try and cover them in an umbrella of what we think is going to catch everything and offer the best assistance to employees, the communities they serve, but make sure and be mindful of their employers and the taxpayers that are in this, that what they're getting is most, most fiscally responsible as well. And so, yeah, is it perfect? I can't say it's perfect, but we're going to start finding out October 1st. Here, just come in a few days when it goes into implementation. That hopefully we will be able to work through any problems, and if we ever need to make changes to it, obviously myself or many are committed to coming back and making changes if it's needed. But let's start somewhere. Let's recognize that we have recognized that this is an issue and a problem, and something we're going to start working on, and that's why I'm happy that this is moving forward.
Well, just as a veteran firefighter myself, still on the job, I can say that the trend has been horrific. It's like there are younger members taking their lives and more on a more frequent basis now than in the early part of my career. So do you have any thoughts on why that is, Matt?
Well, I think part of it might be is that when, and again, my grandfather was a fireman and his father was, when they used to do that, they were just doing firefighting. And they were in, they didn't have the size of buildings that we have and the products that are in there. And they weren't doing the EMS, emergency medical services, and they weren't running on as the many and the type of calls that we are now. Firefighters didn't used to run on car accidents. They used to run on cardiac arrest. They didn't have to run on drownings. And since our profession has evolved, and we've taken on that in this area, we've started to see more things. And so the job has expanded to include other possibilities for these horrific scenes where they didn't used to do that. It just wasn't part of that career field. But because we moved into the emergency medical services area, I believe it's probably completely it's compounded the fact that the possibility is real.
Yeah,
and the
good.
Yeah, I mean, and then like a typical day, I think most people who don't have family members in the that are first responders, I mean, they don't understand what a typical day looks like. I mean, I know just for me, this last couple of shifts at our station, we've had a suicide, we've had a stillborn, we've had a 2 or 3 cardiac arrests over a span of a few shifts. And I mean, that's really nothing remarkable for our station and our territory here in Tallahassee. So, I mean, those are just regular calls. And then you mix in, the call you run on where it's your family member, or you have an active shooting, taking place, or, you have, we had a firefighter attacked by a man with scissors the other day. I mean, these types of things that, it gets so complicated, and it's so hard to reconcile those things in your mind that, they add up. It all kind of compounds.
Well, with an increased population, with an increased call volume, with an increase of such as things as the opiate epidemic, where we're seeing 18, 19, 20-year-olds overdosing in front of us and trying to revive them and their families, and seeing that what it takes on them. One of the worst things while this bill was being processed, I ran a call on a 5-week-old cardiac arrest baby. And I've got this child to deal with as a patient. I've got the parents who are there and distraught. I have the police officers there. And then we transport them to the hospital. And now I have the emergency room staff and nurses and doctors. This is a very tragic thing where a young life that was supposed to be a great time for these young parents to have such a, life-altering thing happen to them. But as difficult as it is for those parents to deal with, and I take nothing away from what they have to deal with. I would never want to be in that position, absolutely. But as first responders, they are in their job, they are supposed to do everything they can to fix and help and resolve problems. And when they work as hard as they do, and the outcome is what it is, and we lose a patient or a child, it's hard on them too. And so it's not only hard on them at work, but I've had to come home to my children many days and just realize how blessed I am that they're still with me, mm-hmm. because so many other families don't have that child. Mm-hmm. And you think about the scene in Parkland, Florida, where parents were standing on the outside of the fence, like prisoners in their own body, outside of that fence, not knowing if their child in that school was alive or not. Mm. And so, how do you manage all of those emotions and those feelings? And some of those parents out there could have even been first responders themselves. So this, first responders aren't just some group that never, they have families and their church members and coaches and all those other things that they see these kids on a regular basis, or friends in their neighborhood. And then when they have to run on them because something tragic has happened, it's just difficult to have to deal with. And so, hopefully this legislation will allow people that need assistance to talk through events and to try and rationalize with things, and to be able to get a good night's sleep, and not forget about these events, but be able to handle them and rationalize with them, and maybe put them in the back of their mind, where they're not always on the forefront all the time.
Well, having been up for the entire session and sat through all those committee meetings, it was really heart-wrenching in the fact of not only hearing the families that have been affected by this, but also the fact of just insinuations like, oh, there's going to be massive fraud, and it's just like an e-ticket out of the fire service, and that's really tough to hear.
Well, in anything in life, there's always someone that's going to try and take advantage of a situation, no matter what there is. But we can't allow fear mongers to sideline us on what is a good piece of legislation, a good law to come forward to take care of the first responders that are being paid for by the taxpayers of the state of Florida, or the community they work in, to protect and take care of them. And, we've had all this legislation in the past that said if you have a physical injury, we'll make sure you're healthy. We'll make sure you come back to work. We need you at that fire station or that police station. But in this case, if you didn't have a physical injury, you were just pushed aside and told to deal with it. And we're paying you to be at work. And so somebody may have been physically in the best shape to be there, but if their mind wasn't in the game because they couldn't deal with and bring the training and the expertise that they needed on that next call when the bell went off, when 911 was called, that employee, doesn't matter how they physically are. If they're not in the right mindset, they're not going to be able to produce and function and take care and mitigate that 911 call. So hopefully because this legislation will help and cover under the workers' compensation system a non-physical injury. I'm hoping that it is another piece of the puzzle that we put together to make sure that we have a full picture of how our first responders should be.
And Matt, as you mentioned, as we record this, October 1, here just in a few days, the law will actually go into effect. Why don't you kind of unpack some of the things that are covered in the law?
Well, what should happen on October 1st is employers around the state of Florida should realize that this is a new part of the workers' compensation system. Where they already had doctors and they already had nurses and they already had procedures and protocols in place that if someone broke their arm or got hit with a piece of equipment, or God forbid, a police officer was shot, that they knew exactly what to do. And they had that in place. And I'm hoping that they'll have that in place come October 1st here for this as well, that the bill says they have to have a licensed psychiatrist. So do they have to have them and pay them all the time? No, they can have a contract with them. They'll have them on retainer. Maybe they do have one in their health clinic if they have their own health clinic. And so they'll have that person on contract, and they'll follow the same protocols as they would for a physical injury as they will for a non-physical injury, where if you were on a 911 call and you suffered an injury or you suffered from some kind of mental anguish or difficulty of what you saw on that call, such as a coworker being shot or killed, or a child dying, or a horrific car accident, and those running on your family members and things like that. It'll be the same process where your unit that you're on will be taken out of service. You'll be taken off of that unit and replaced with someone else, because we, again, have to provide service to the public. They demand of us. But that person then will be their paperwork will be processed to say that this person is not mentally fit for work, or they admit themselves that they're having difficulties dealing with what they just saw or dealt with, and they'll be sent to their healthcare clinic, or they'll be sent to the employer's medical doctor, and then also referred to the psychiatrist to see further treatment. Now, the bill doesn't go into what treatment they're going to deal with, because first of all, everyone could be different. Who dictates that treatment is going to be offered for each patient. We can't always say that every patient that goes into a hospital, we know exactly what we're going to do and fix, because everyone's different. So I'm sure that under their medical profession and their medical license, they know the course of treatment that's going to be needed for this person to mitigate and deal with the situation and to come back to work. Does it mean they'll be out of work for a couple of days? Does it mean they'll be prescribed some medication to help them? All those different things that they'll be done. Just like if you broke your arm, you would be sent to a doctor for an x-ray, and they would set your arm, and they would put a cast on it, and they would leave it in a cast for 3 weeks, and you'd come back for an evaluation, and then another 3 weeks, they would take it off and do another x-ray. That's how we do it with a physical injury, right? It's the same thing with a mental problem or a condition. There is a course of treatment that these medical professionals have been trained and are licensed to do, and we'll follow their guidance in that aspect.
No, that was a great walkthrough, Matt. And just from me personally, I appreciate you being and serving in the House. It's great to have a firefighter. I mean, I've witnessed it so many times, just being up in the gallery, how you've been able to give our perspective, and it's really, I've seen it change legislators' positions, both Democrats and Republicans. It's just it's very powerful. Especially, I remember that one time when you talked about the kid. It's like, this just happened over the weekend while you were doing a barbecue. This is what I was going through.
Well, let's remember this. The legislature is made up of all walks of life people: doctors, lawyers, firefighters, private industry, entrepreneurs, all this, and that's what gives us a great perspective about all professions. But this is also not a partisan issue. Firefighters, police officers, they don't respond to calls by party. And so it doesn't matter. This is just good legislation in a bipartisan manner that's brought forward to take care of people that are meant to take care of the entire demographic of the state of Florida. We don't care about party. This was not a party issue. And that's why I was so happy to have so many people from either side of the aisle, no matter what side I'm on or the other side, that supported this legislation. And it got an overwhelming amount of support. And I can tell you in the House, it was 120-0 that it passed with no naysayers in the House.
Wow.
And it went over to the Senate, and it passed over there. And then the governor said immediately, I'm going to sign this legislation. And, there was a lot of representatives and senators that had worked on this in different times and different bills filed. But this was the one that we came together on. And this is the one we supported. And this one is the one that we passed. Again, I hope it will be a start to what will be a very good piece of legislation to help our first responders.
Yeah, Matt, I echo Doug's sentiment. I'm really grateful for the work that you've done. I'm extremely proud of you, knowing you through the years and watching you just be a great leader. You're a wonderful leader. You've made a lot of personal sacrifices. Your family makes a lot of personal sacrifices, and we're grateful for that. We're also grateful for all of our colleagues who were co-sponsors of the bill that got on board. I know Senator Book. On the Senate side, and I'm sure we're leaving out a lot, but the families. I mean, I'm grateful to the families, and we really want to thank them. I remember I was in Orlando for the IFF educational symposium, and there was a hearing happening that day. I think it was late January, and I remember I ended up staying in the hotel room that morning to watch the testimonies. The families testify about their experiences, and I mean, I couldn't leave the hotel room. I mean, I sat there on the bed and I just bawled, man. It crushed me. And, I think it's such a sad place that we find ourselves in, and we've all lost. I know the three of us can talk about brothers and sisters we've lost to suicide. And, I think now we're breaking through that stigma. This is allowing us to, not only, prevent the actual event of suicide and all that, but back up and actually provide treatment along the way. Get these. Now there's going to be education in fire school for firefighters that are going through training to learn about PTSD, to learn about mental awareness. And, we got to clean the fire truck, and we got to make sure the tools are shiny and the tools are bright and the tools work. But we also got to work, like you said, you got to work on that brain, man. That's a big muscle up there. And if we don't keep that brain and that wellness, that mindset in good shape, then we're not going to be effective. And reality is, look, for cities and counties, they have a vested interest in keeping our firefighters and our police officers, on the job and healthy for a long time. That's a fiscally responsible position to be in. So, just grateful for that. And I know you're a busy man, so we don't want to keep you too much longer here. Is there anything you want to wrap up with, or anything else you want to add to the conversation?
Well, you mentioned, you said exactly. Senator Book was a great ally to work on this. She had the same experience with a neighbor down there, wondering why her neighbor was having with this and being at work. And as you said, also, firefighters and police officers, these are career jobs. They get into them for a career, for a lifetime. And so why wouldn't you want to keep that career firefighter, police officer, EMT, paramedic in that job for as long as you can, serving and protecting? They know that community. They're well invested in that community. And, it is it is a concern of cities and counties. It's a potential fiscal concern of theirs as well. But, they have as much invested in those firefighters and police officers as anybody. They work for them. They answer to them. They take care of them, whether it be on their buying their vehicles or equipment or uniforms and all that stuff. But they have a vested interest in it as well. And so in the end of the day, everyone came together, Democrats, Republicans, cities and counties, and we all supported legislation, knowing that, again, it may not be perfect, but we're going to work on it. And we're going to make sure that the procedures and protocols put in place is at least mindful and taking care of the first responders that take care of the communities that we all represent. And so, again, I appreciate you bringing awareness to this subject. It does go into effect October, and we're going to start to see where it needs. And we can always come back in any future session and make changes if we have to. But it's certainly a good start, and I'm proud to be a part of it. I'm so proud of the support that we got from our first responder community, and just to make sure that we do the right thing for people.
Matt, if anybody would like to reach out to you personally, send you any messages or correspond with you, is there any way they can do that?
Well, they can send it to matt.willhite@myfloridahouse.gov. That's my email address. They can always reach out to my office. We obviously, as I said, I have staff. They can always reach out to my staff. Our office number is 561-791-4071. It is a great way to reach out to or contact us. Or you can go to the Florida House of Representatives website and find your representative or find mine and contact us through that webpage as well.
All right, fantastic. Well, we're not going to keep you. Matt, you've representative, friend, brother, job well done, and we look forward to another great session with you up in Tallahassee in 2019. So we appreciate you coming on, and thank all the listeners for checking us out, and we will talk to you next time on the Doug and Mike Show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Matt.